My name is John Miller, and I'm 42 years old. I own a small landscaping company here in Santa Clara, California. Nothing huge, but it keeps me busy, and the bills paid. My wife Emily works for a big tech firm downtown as an IT manager. She's 41, and we've been married for 20 years now, ever since we met back in college. Most days follow a pretty typical routine. I'm up at 6 a.m. to get the crew organized and make sure we have all the equipment loaded up for the day's jobs. It's tiring work under the California sun, but I actually really enjoy being outdoors and seeing a client's yard totally transformed by the end of the day. Gives me a sense of satisfaction, you know. Emily has her own morning hustle, getting dressed up for the office and downing a protein shake before kissing me goodbye around 7:30. Her company's been working her pretty hard lately with some big network upgrades they're doing. She seems perpetually stressed, and I've definitely noticed her staying late more nights than not recently. This particular morning last week started off pretty normally. I was doing the breakfast dish routine, rinsing out my coffee mug when Emily swooped in and planted a kiss on my cheek. "Love you, babe," she said in a hurry, grabbing her laptop bag. She shot me one of those tight smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes before rushing out the door. Maybe I'm just being paranoid after 2 decades together, but I could sense something was off with her lately. She seemed distant, preoccupied even, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. I brushed it off at the time, figured it was just more job stress, and headed out to my truck to start another day on the job. Little did I know, my life was about to be blown wide open in a way I never could have imagined. It was pretty routine stuff that morning. Couple of basic yard lawn mows, some hedge trimming, that kind of thing. I kept myself busy focusing on work, but couldn't help feeling a niggling sense that something wasn't quite right. When I got home around 5 p.m., I could see an unfamiliar gray sedan parked a little haphazardly in front of our driveway. That was odd. I felt my heart rate pick up as I killed the engine and stepped out of my truck. The house was strangely quiet as I let myself in through the front door. Way too quiet. That's when I heard the sounds, gasping, creaking, coming from our bedroom. I crept slowly down the hallway and pushed open the bedroom door. And that's when I saw it, the truth that shattered my world into a million pieces. There was Emily, Emily, naked and writhing on top of some stranger on our marital bed. A white-hot flash of rage and betrayal swept over me as the meaning of what I was witnessing instantly sank in. The man locked eyes with me, panic spreading over his features as he shoved Emily off of him. That's when I recognized him. Mark Johnson, some big-shot director at Emily's company. The pieces all fit together with a sickening thud. I stood frozen for a moment, barely registering Emily's stuttered pleas for me to wait, that she could explain. Explain what? The fact that she was screwing her boss in our own damn bedroom while I was out working my ass off. I snatched the metal baseball bat we keep in the closet, vision-tinted red. "You two have 10 seconds to get the hell out of my house before I put this thing through a wall," I snarled through clenched teeth. They didn't need to be told twice. Emily clutched the bedsheet around her naked body, tears streaming down her face as Mark hurriedly tugged on his pants. I watched in a state of stunned detachment as the two of them scurried out of the bedroom like roaches when the lights get flipped on. I dropped down on the edge of the bed, head spinning, and let the full, gut-wrenching reality of my wife's infidelity wash over me. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this after everything we'd been through together? That's when I noticed her phone lying on the nightstand, screen lit up with a notification from Mark. "Can't wait to take you away for our anniversary trip this weekend." Anniversary trip. While I was busting my ass to surprise her with a romantic weekend for our 20th anniversary, the rage came crashing back in waves of disbelieving anguish. I snatched up Emily's phone, needing to see for myself the full extent of her lies and betrayal. What I read in those messages over the next few hours left me shattered, barely a shadow of the man I'd been that morning. I must have sat there in stunned silence for what felt like hours, Emily's phone clutched in my shaking hands as I pored over the endless chain of incriminating texts and emails between her and Mark. Each message was like a fresh knife twist to my gut. Snatched photos of them together at restaurants and hotels. Explicit details of their trysts when I was out of town for work. Dirty talk and inside jokes that made my skin crawl. It was all there. Sordid timeline of lies and deceptions spanning back nearly a year. The worst was the back and forth about their anniversary weekend plans while I'd been making arrangements for a surprise romantic getaway to celebrate 20 years of marriage. She really was going to let me think she was away at some bullshit work conference while in reality she was off screwing her boss at some overpriced resort on my dime. I felt nauseous, struggling to breathe against the tightness in my chest. This level of calculated, long-term betrayal from the woman I devoted half my life to was almost more than I could fathom. We'd been through hard times, lapses in work, family health scares, you name it, but we'd always loved and supported each other unconditionally. Or so I thought. Lost in my anguished thoughts, I barely registered the sound of Emily's tremulous voice from behind me. John, baby, I'm so sorry. You have to know it didn't mean anything, not really. I got caught up and I whirled on her, eyes blazing as her feeble words trailed off. Didn't mean anything. Roared, causing her to flinch. 9 months of lying, cheating on me in our own damn home while I was working to support this family. Yeah. I can really see how that might just slip your mind as meaningless. Emily opened and closed her mouth soundlessly, tears streaking down her face. Suddenly noticed she was wearing one of my old t-shirts, looking impossibly small and childlike as she shrank back against the bedroom wall. Please, she whispered, voice cracking. You have to let me explain. It was a moment of weakness that just spiraled out of control. You know how much pressure I've been under at work lately. I let out a mirthless bark of laughter, cutting her off. So that's your excuse. Stress at the office made you forget your vows and hop into bed with your douchebag boss. She winced at my harsh words but plowed on desperately. No, God no, it's not an excuse. Just hear me out, please. I still love you, I do. Regarded her coolly, feeling something vital splinter inside me at her plaintive words. You know what, Em? I don't think I can handle any more of your bullshit explanations and empty apologies right now. I need some space to process this. Turning on my heel, I stalked out of the bedroom and out the front door, grabbing my truck keys along the way. I didn't have a plan or destination in mind. I just knew I had to get out of that house before I completely shattered. Climbing into the driver's seat, I peeled out of the driveway, drunk on pure rage and desolation. After driving aimlessly for what could have been minutes or hours, I found myself pulling up outside the modest ranch-style home of my best friend Mike Thompson. We'd known each other since we were kids, and he was pretty much the only person in the world I could trust with the mind-bending shit show my life had become. I brought a shaky hand up to rap on Mike's front door, chest still heaving with the exertion of unspeakable emotion. When he answered, one look at my face must have spoken volumes. Dude. Mike's eyes widened in alarm. What the hell happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. Swallowed hard, barely able to force out the words. It's Emily. She's been cheating on me, man. For almost a year. Just saying it out loud caused a choked sound of anguish to escape my lips. Mike ushered me inside, steadying hand on my shoulder as I struggled not to come completely unraveled right there. Start from the beginning, he said gently, leading me to his couch. Tell me everything. I must have spent hours unloading the whole sordid tale to Mike, words tumbling out in a raw, incoherent gush. He sat in silence, letting me vent in rage and cry until I was a spent, hollowed-out husk. I can't believe she could do this to me, to us. Choked out, staring at my hands. After 20 goddamn years together, how could someone you love, someone you trusted with everything, throw it all away like that? Mike shook his head slowly. I don't have any answers, man. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Emily was like a sister to me. I never would have seen this coming from her. Snorted bitterly. Yeah, well, you're not the only one blindsided. She had me completely fooled, playing the part of the devoted wife while lying through her teeth every single day. A heavy silence hung between us until Mike finally spoke up again. Have you thought about what you want to do from here? About your future with Emily? The words felt like a lead weight dropping into the pit of my stomach. My future with Emily, just hours ago, that had seemed like a given, something stable and certain on which I could build the rest of my days. Now it felt like a crumbling facade covering a vast, empty unknown. Honestly, I don't know if I can look at her the same way again, I said, voice catching. When I think about her betrayal, about how she made me into a lover's scorned punchline by parading around with that douchebag right under my nose. Trail off, anger reigniting in my chest. The saddest part is, I was actually looking at retiring in the next few years so we could spend more time together, traveling and just enjoying life, you know. While she was making plans to take off with her side piece on what should have been our anniversary trip. Mike placed a comforting hand on my shoulder as I bowed my head, fighting back the grief that threatened to swallow me whole. He didn't need to say anything. I could see the pain and sympathy shining in his eyes as he struggled for the right words. Listen, man, I don't need to tell you how incredibly messed up this whole situation is, he said finally. Emily made her choices, stupid as they were. And now she has to live with the consequences. But you don't have to make any rash decisions right now. I opened my mouth to protest, but Mike held up a hand. I mean it, John. Take some time, process everything that's happened. Get mad, get sad, feel whatever gut punch of emotions you need to. Then, when the dust settles, you can figure out if this is something you can work through or not. Either way, I'm here for you, brother. His words were like a life raft in the churning sea of turmoil and pain I felt myself drowning in. I realized with a start that through the devastation of the last day, Mike's home had become a sanctuary, likely the only stable ground I had to stand on right now. Thanks, Mikey, I said thickly, pulling him in for an embrace. I don't know what I'd do without you right now. He clapped me hard on the back. That's what best friends are for, right? Now, how about we crack open a couple beers and put something mindless on TV for a while? Lord knows you could use a break. I managed a watery chuckle, the first hint of lightness I'd felt since walking in on Emily's unthinkable betrayal. You read my mind, buddy. We settled in on the couch, the flickering glow of the TV offering a temporary escape from the storm of heartbreak that still raged inside me. Mike handed me a beer, and I took a long pull, hoping the bitter taste could wash away the image of Emily's shame-filled eyes that was seared into my mind. I knew the anguish and anger were still there, lying in wait under the surface like a ticking time bomb. But in that moment, surrounded by the quiet camaraderie of a true friend, I was able to draw a steadying breath and simply exist for a little while without the crushing weight of inevitable decisions looming over me. In the days after the initial confrontation, I felt adrift in a waking nightmare, I couldn't seem to escape. Mike did his best to keep me tethered, letting me crash on his couch and attempting to distract me with TV binges, home-cooked meals, you name it. But the truth was, I was slowly hollowing out from the inside. "You can't keep going on like this, man," he said gently one evening, having returned from work to find me sitting mutely on the couch, staring into space. "Have you thought any more about what you want to do? About calling a lawyer or something?" I shook my head woodenly. The idea of taking any kind of action, making decisions that would permanently upend my life as I knew it, terrified me. Big part of me still naively hoped that if I didn't engage, didn't acknowledge this new reality, maybe it would all turn out to be some horrible mistake that could be undone. But Mike was having none of my avoidance routine. "Look, I get that this is heavy stuff to process," he pressed on, "but you can't just stick your head in the sand forever. That's only going to prolong the hurt." Something about his words struck a chord deep within me. As much as I was loath to face it, Mike was right. The woman I'd committed over half my life to had irrevocably shattered my reality. Simply wishing it away wasn't going to change that harsh truth. "You're right, buddy," I sighed, rubbing my temples warily. "I know I need to take action for my own sanity if nothing else. It's just, where the hell do I even start picking up the pieces?" Mike settled onto the couch next to me. "Well, the way I see it, step one is looking into your options from a legal standpoint, getting documentation together, understanding what a split could look like financially and custody-wise with the kids." He trailed off as I cringed inwardly. Our two kids, Jenna and Luke, who were off at college and blissfully unaware of the bombshell that had blown up their parents' marriage. Just another gut punch I'd eventually have to face, breaking the news to them about their mom's massive betrayal. "Hey," Mike reached over and gripped my shoulder firmly. "I'm not trying to pile on here, man. I'm just saying you owe it to yourself to know what you're up against if splitting up is the road you want to go down in the end. That way you can go into it with your eyes open and feeling empowered, not like Emily took another cheap shot at you." I mulled over his words, finally giving a slow nod. As terrifying as it was to start taking tangible steps towards separation, he was right. I needed to get ahead of this before everything completely slipped out of my control. "Okay, yeah," I said, feeling a flicker of resolve rekindle in my chest. "I'm gonna look into divorce lawyers this week, get the ball rolling on at least consulting with some experts. I swallowed hard. It's time to rip off the Band-Aid, as much as it's going to hurt like hell." Mike squeezed my shoulder supportively. "That's the spirit. And just remember, you've got me here to lean on through all of it, all right? We're gonna get you out on the other side of this storm." I felt a rush of gratitude for my lifelong friend. "Thanks, Mike. I don't know what I would have done without you these past weeks." He waved off my words gruffly. "None of that, bud. That's what bros are for. We look out for each other through the bad shit life throws our way. Speaking of which," he rose from the couch and grabbed us each a beer from the kitchen. "Let's kick back and not think about anything heavy tonight. I'll even put on the game if you want." I accepted the cold bottle gratefully, allowing myself to relax slightly as Mike flipped on the TV. The ambient sounds of the basketball announcers' voices washed over me as I took my first sip, offering a brief respite from the turmoil whirling inside my mind. In that moment of hard-won calm, it dawned on me that as scary as it would be to start taking steps to disentangle my life from Emily's, it was a necessary means to an end where I could envision feeling whole and unshackled again someday. It was a faint spark of hope to cling to as I steeled myself for the arduous battle looming ahead, a path I knew would not be easy to walk, but one that could lead me back to solid ground. True to my word to Mike, I forced myself to start exploring my legal options the following week. I had to take some deep breaths before walking into the nondescript office building that housed a local divorce attorney who had been highly recommended. The whole situation still felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life play out as an outsider. But I knew if I had any hope of regaining control over my shattered reality, I needed to act decisively. The lawyer, Patricia Alvarez, was a no-nonsense woman maybe a decade older than me. As I haltingly recounted the details of Emily's affair and our subsequent separation, she listened impassively, taking sparse notes without judgment. "Based on what you've told me, Mr. Miller, you have fairly solid grounds to pursue a divorce," she said when I'd finished speaking. "Not only was your wife unfaithful, but her indiscretions appear to have been premeditated over an extended period." I squeezed my eyes shut momentarily as another wave of hurt washed over me. Even having the sordid details spelled out so clinically by a third party didn't fully prepare me for how much hearing that truth would sting. Patricia must have sensed my discomfort as she gentled her tone slightly. "I know this is an incredibly difficult process, John, but my role is to advise you on the best path forward to protect your interests, both personal and financial." Nodding numbly, I followed along as she began outlining potential custody arrangements for our 2 kids, asset divisions, what to reasonably expect in terms of alimony. It was dizzying. Jumbled kaleidoscope of numbers, percentages, and legalese spinning around my addled brain. "I'm sorry, can we just take a step back for a minute?" I finally had to interject, feeling my heart thudding in my ears. Patricia paused expectantly as I struggled to gather my whirling thoughts. "It's a lot to process all at once, you know," I said haltingly. "I think I need to sort through what a complete separation and divorce could actually mean before I start wading too deeply into the logistics." To her credit, Patricia simply nodded in understanding. "Of course, that's perfectly reasonable. Why don't you take some time to mull things over? I'm happy to lay out a few scenarios for you in the meantime. Worst case, best case, and something in the middle. That way you can start wrapping your mind around the different potentials with no pressure." I exhaled slowly, some of the tightness easing from my chest. Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks for understanding." As I stood and shook Patricia's hand, my gaze landed on a small bamboo plant sat on the edge of her desk. It was limp and browning, clearly dying from lack of water or nutrients. Just an innocuous office decoration to most. But in that moment, it felt like a painfully apt metaphor for what my life had become. Something once vibrantly green and thriving, withering away from neglect. The drive back to Mike's place passed by in a blur as I turned over everything the lawyer had said, my mind racing in endless circles. I knew I couldn't realistically avoid making hugely impactful choices for much longer. Whether I was ready or not, I would have to rip off the Band-Aid soon enough. "How'd the meeting go?" Mike looked up from the couch as I trudged inside, reading my grim expression instantly. "That bad, huh?" I sank down next to him with a mirthless chuckle. "Well, the lawyer didn't sugarcoat anything. That's for damn sure. Basically laid it all out there. Divorce, custody, dividing up assets, and all the nitty-gritty neither of us want to think about." Mike shook his head slowly. "Man, I can't even imagine how overwhelming that must have been. Did you get any clarity at all from it?" "Some," I admitted. "But honestly, I think I was kidding myself if I expected one meeting to neatly tie everything up with a bow, you know. This whole situation is just messier than I could have ever prepared for." Comfortable silence stretched between us until I spoke up again, voicing the doubts that had been gnawing at me since leaving Patricia's office. The whole time I was sitting there, I kept having to remind myself that we were talking about my life. Said heavily, my marriage, my kids, my future, that's all up in the air now because of Emily's actions. It's like, how the hell did I get here, man? Mike laid a sympathetic hand on my shoulder. I hear you, buddy. Believe me, I can't fathom being in your shoes right now. Just know that no matter how lost or hopeless it feels, you've got me here to lean on every step of the way. I smiled wanly at my friend's steadfast loyalty. I know, Mikey. I don't think I can ever thank you enough for everything you've done for me these past few weeks. Ah, save it. He waved me off gruffly, the corners of his eyes crinkling. What are best friends for if not to have each other's backs through the roughest shit life can throw at you? I opened my mouth to respond, but Mike had already snatched up the TV remote, casual mask dropping back into place. Now, how about we get our minds off the heavy stuff for a little bit? I've heard this new show everyone's talking about is pretty solid. I watched fondly as Mike busied himself queuing up the program, eternally grateful for his knack for giving me the breathing room I desperately needed. With a small, relaxing exhale, I allowed myself to temporarily get swept up in the trivial dramas playing out on screen, seeking solace in the fleeting distraction. As the weeks crept by, I progressively felt like I was slowly emerging from a dense fog that had consumed my life. With Mike's steadfast support and guidance from Patricia, I took the painful but necessary steps to officially file for divorce from Emily. It was agonizing to lay out all the evidence of her infidelity, the sordid messages and hotel receipts that had burned holes in my heart. But there was also a strange sense of empowerment, of finally taking control of a situation that had controlled me for too long. Of course, that didn't make breaking the news to our kids, Jenna and Luke, any less gut-wrenching. I'll never forget the shattered, innocent looks on their faces as I watched their world shifting irreparably under their feet. How could Mom do this? Jenna had whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Luke could only sit there stone-faced, lips pressed into a tight line as the reality sank in. I wish I had an answer that could make sense of it, you too, I said heavily. But the truth is, your mother made some choices that I can't look past. As much as it destroys me to say this, our family is never going to be the same. We clung together for what felt like an eternity, letting the tides of shock and sorrow wash over us. In that moment, I realized with a pang that despite the anguish, at least I could take solace in being surrounded by loved ones who had my back, who knew my truth. Emily, on the other hand, had thoroughly alienated herself through the lies and deceptions. Those first few months after filing felt like I was living in a waking dream, drained yet cleared of the dead weight that had been dragging me down. Emily made a few half-hearted attempts to plead for another chance, but I simply couldn't find it in me to engage after being burned so completely. I needed to prioritize protecting my own peace. You have to try to look towards the future, man, Mike counseled during one of our weekly hangouts. I know it's hard, but you can't let her mess keep you trapped in the past. I smiled wryly, nursing a beer. You're right. I know holding on to anger and resentment is only going to taint whatever life I'm trying to rebuild. Doesn't make it easy, but I'm working on it. Slowly but surely, I found myself seizing on small victories to stay afloat, routine habits disrupted by the separation that I gradually molded back into my own image. Reorganizing the house, redecorating, finding solace in my work, and reconnecting with old friends and family. Seemingly insignificant steps that collectively helped anchor me, pull me further away from the wreckage of betrayal. Of course, there were still dark days, sudden waves of grief and bitterness that threatened to pull me back under. Like the first night moving into my new apartment, staring at the bare walls and feeling overwhelmingly alone. Or random reminders that would set off a spiral of what-ifs and second-guessing. "You did the right thing, you know," Mike reassured me one night as I confided those nagging doubts. "Emily made her choices, shitty as they were. You upheld your vows and stayed true to yourself until she shattered that foundation. Don't let her lies make you question your own integrity, brother." Took a fortifying breath, giving a small nod. As always, Mike could see through me, could cut through the noise echoing in my head, and recenter me. I didn't think I'd ever be able to repay him for being my anchor through the deepest, darkest storm of my life. The hardest part was trying to envision a fulfilling life separate from the one I'd invested 2 decades building. Some nights I'd lie awake, turning over memories like stones, first dates, holidays, all the precious moments Emily had been present for, an intrinsic part of the fabric of my existence. Future where she was no longer woven into the very tapestry of my day-to-day life felt impossible to picture some days. But in my most grounded moments, I was slowly able to look at that vast, daunting unknown and choose to be excited, not terrified by its possibilities. I've wasted too much of my life in the past few months being angry and hurt, you know. Used to Mike over pizza and beers. It's like I've been sleepwalking while the world passed me by. I don't want to wake up one day wondering where all the time went. Mike grinned around a swig of his drink. There he is, the glimmer of the old John I know and love starting to shine through again. It's about damn time. Rolled my eyes good-naturedly, though his words did make a kernel of warmth bloom in my chest. Maybe this new beginning wouldn't be as scary as I thought. Maybe it was a chance to reimagine my life from the ground up, to build something completely removed from Emily's shattered shards. The most surprising part of my journey forward was how naturally I found myself able to wish Emily well, not out of any lingering feelings, but from a place of self-preservation and peace. I knew there was nothing to gain from holding resentment over a sunk ship, so I let the weight of that baggage slip away, unburdening my load so I could continue on lighter and freer. I started picking up new hobbies, slowly weaving in textures and colors to my existence that didn't bear Emily's imprint, tending to a modest vegetable garden, learning Spanish online in the evenings, and taking weekend road trips to camp under the stars and reconnect with nature. Simple activities, but ones that grounded me and sparked tiny flames of excitement for whatever still lay ahead. As the rawness of the divorce faded into a duller, more manageable ache, I found an unexpected sense of gratitude washing over me. Of course, I would always carry a certain amount of grief and loss from having my life derailed in such a cataclysmic way. But there was also a clarity born from having the Band-Aid ripped away, exposing Emily's truth and freeing me to finally live authentically. Am I crazy, or does all this heartache and upheaval feel liberating in a weird way? Asked Mike one evening as we nursed beers on his back patio. He considered for a moment before responding. "Nah, you're not losing it, bud. I think what you're feeling is the freedom that comes with shedding all the lies and blown smoke Emily had you living under, whether you realized it or not." He took a swig from his bottle. "It was like you were sleepwalking through your own life while she was steering the ship right over a cliff. At least now it's just you, your reality, your choices. No more illusions muddying the waters." I nodded slowly, letting his words resonate, as terrifying as it still felt some days to be a newborn in this reimagined existence. Mike was right. There was also an undeniable power in taking full ownership of my life again. No longer would I be beholden to someone else's selfish deceptions. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew that. There would still be moments of weakness, days when the grief knocked me squarely on my ass and left me flailing. But at my core, I could feel a newly tempered resilience beginning to harden like steel, fortified by the fires I'd already walked through. I would keep putting one foot in front of the other, focusing not on what I'd lost, but on all the new horizons and possibilities still waiting to be seized. I had survived the unthinkable deconstruction of my life as I'd known it, and I would keep surviving, adapted and remade, until I could finally shake off the last lingering dust of the wreckage and stand tall in the sunlight once more. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel, give us a like, share our story. See you all soon.